Greg Gaines. I'm in the Atlanta, Georgia area. And my connection with Terry started from, a simple LinkedIn request that came through from someone on his staff, just kind of, asking if I had any interest in franchising. It just so happens that at the time I did. And so, decided to connect and explore it and see where it went. Recently, over the last few years, my son was born a few years ago, and I realized that, my current career as an IT professional was certainly fulfilling. It was certainly rewarding, but I thought there was probably more I could do that would benefit him long term, mostly, and provide a legacy that both he and I could be proud of. And so I wanted to get into some type of business, but I thought franchising was probably the right approach simply because you can find a tried and true method and then just execute on it. And so initially there were several different franchises that were introduced to me by Terry after he had an opportunity to meet me and really understand what drove me, which mainly was having a huge impact on the community, something that I could be proud of doing every day, and something again that could connect me with a legacy that I could be proud of. He went out and he did his work to really find, a handful of franchises that he thought would be a good fit. And so he came back with some and we kind of went back and forth. Ultimately, we had maybe three or four that I explored. There were some that maybe weren't so connected with, you know, particularly an impact to children. That's something that's really important to me. And so ultimately there were two that were, you could say, were finalists. One was a fundraising opportunity for particularly high school kids. I thought it was phenomenal. One of the issues there was just there wasn't a long history. I wanted something that was tried and true. British Swim School certainly has a very long legacy with over 45 years in operation. And then you can't get any better than saving lives, particularly saving kids' lives. And so this one really connected with me. And as I explored it and learned more and more about it, I realized that it was just the right fit. There are so many different franchising opportunities that are out there. So for someone that doesn't come from that long, history and experience that Terry has, just diving in by yourself, it's going to be really difficult to peel back those layers and really understand all of the nuances and have the relationships with the various different franchises to know which ones are probably the best opportunities and which ones are probably not the right ones, particularly for a first-time franchisee. And so what Terry did is he really, like I said, he understood me, he understood what drove me and what I was looking for. So, obviously something with a huge community impact, particularly, with kids, something that again was tried and true, could be successful, something that was, cost effective, had a really good business model. And so for me, Terry came back with several that certainly win that category. But ultimately, as we discussed it and went back and forth, there just was nothing like British Swim School that was out there. Something that I can connect with because I started swimming at the age of 4 at my preschool, which was really just not something that everyone gets an opportunity to do. And so I've got that long history of swimming. And again, the impact, you really can't get any better than saving lives. And so Terry and I just talked about it, and ultimately I decided to pursue it, learn more and more about British Swim School. And every day, every week that I learned about it, my passion for it just grew and grew. For me, I have a couple decades of professional experience that have really helped, to be honest with you, as I move forward. So I've got experience with leadership, experience that spans customer service and, IT, which there's a component to that with British Swim School. So I've been able to lean on that. I've also been a previous business owner independently with some e-commerce online. I was an eBay power seller back in the day. And so I understand what it takes to make a business successful. But again, I hadn't followed the franchise model before. So with this venture, sure, there are going to be some bumps here and there, some things you didn't quite know about. And so for me, it starts with just picking a territory. Initially, the territories that I looked at, there were probably two or three that seemed like they were, the best fit for me or most likely to be a good fit. One that I pursued, it was really difficult to find partners, particularly with the British Swim School model. We look for pool partners to save on costs because we don't want to build out, $1 million facilities and that sort of thing. So you save on your overhead by partnering with existing facilities. So the first territory that I looked at, there were a few different potential opportunities there, but ultimately we just didn't land on a pool partnership that was going to work. And it ended up really being a good thing for me because the territory that I finally settled on has many different pool partners. And I've partnered with an LA Fitness in the territory that has just welcomed us with open arms. And so as we have gotten up and running, I've got an aquatics manager, I have a swim instructor that are both very experienced, great personalities, really building a great team there. And we launched a little bit under a month ago, and we're over 36 customers now, or 36 students, I should say. Some of those are taking classes multiple times per week. So we're very busy. So, the stumbles up front with kind of deciding on a territory, that sort of thing, ended up just really being a good thing. I'm glad that, we landed where we are, and this community has embraced us full force. Terry kind of his way of explaining it was he's like a golf caddy, right? So he may understand the terrain and the distance and the wind and which direction it's blowing and how hard, but ultimately you're the one who has to take the swing. And so Terry just has a wealth of knowledge as it relates to franchising and really just understanding people. Terry is really good at understanding what motivates them and finding a way to connect them with the right opportunity. Without Terry, I will say that I don't see a scenario where I would have landed on British Swim School, but I can honestly say that I can't think of another franchise that would have been a better fit for me. So, I have Terry to thank for that. And I would absolutely recommend Terry to anyone who's looking at franchising. I think he's just one of the best in the business, if not the best. I've heard so many great things about him from people that I've spoken with, the franchises that I was exploring. Everyone had great things to say about Terry because, again, he just cares about you connecting with the right opportunity. For him, it's not a transaction. For him, it really is about him being proud of the work that he's doing and that he can look back and say, hey, I helped this person change their life, change their career. And so he did that for me, and I would absolutely recommend him to anyone that's looking at franchising. We know that we're the best in the business and we can provide that for them. So it really just feels good to have an opportunity to do that for this community.